It's night, and we're out walking around investigating things. And I was reminded that I'd been asked a question about preparation. How do I prepare for running Fantasy Flight Games Star Wars? This is kind of a difficult question, not because the preparation that I do is all that hard, mainly because it isn't. So, I break it down. I have to remember that I'm preparing for a session of Star Wars. We're going to be playing for 2.5, 3, 4 hours, depending on the day. And at the end of that session, it's very important to me as the game master that everybody felt like what happened could have happened in a Star Wars movie, or at the very least, a Star Wars story, like a novel or something. That's of primary importance. So this is a question of genre. Am I guess, feeling the genre for this setup? And if I'm not feeling like this is the kind of thing that would happen in a Star Wars story, then something either at the ending of the previous session or something about the way we've discussed the setup of this coming session, something has gone awry. This is like a quality control step. Do I feel like I'm gearing up for Star Wars? Well, how do I do that? I'm the kind of game master in whose mind the game universe is always spinning. It's always running, moving, shifting. And by that, I do not mean that I'm thinking, what am I going to do next? What story am I going to create next? I very much come from the point of view of the emergent story, what gets called in a lot of indie games as playing to find out. I'm not at all interested in writing a story beforehand. Not at all interested. And so when I say that the game world is always spinning in my head, I mean I'm thinking about reactions to actions. And I'm getting in the head of NPCs. The game gives us quite a few cool tools to make sure that it's relevant to the players. It's relevant particularly to their characters, the characters that they have chosen to play. Through obligation, duty, or morality, and through mostly their motivation, you can track or check whether or not what is shaping up to be the next event is worth doing for those characters. That you're not enforcing something that you think would be cool at the expense of the reason why people gathered to play. So I think of, who are my players? What happened in the last session? What have they expressed they want to do next? How likely is it that their enemies or the people that they're tied to via obligation could find out about what they're going to do next, or be in a position to either coincidentally or intentionally get involved somehow? Why do I think that? One, it's Star Wars. Coincidence plays a huge role in the genre, but also because every session you roll for obligation or duty or morality. I'm just going to keep saying obligation because I run an Edge of the Empire campaign. So every session I'm rolling for that. It could be any of their obligations or it could be none. I need to think about ways I might want to express activating an obligation. Will it be just a conversation between the characters where they talk about why somebody is so stressed? Or will it be something happening behind the scenes that they know nothing about, such as, one of Jabba the Hutt's spies following our heroes to the Millennium Falcon? They don't know that he's there yet. He is. What is the source of strain, recognized or unrecognized? Is it the fact that they fear they might be followed, or that they might be overheard, or there might be competition waiting for them for a job contract, etc., etc.? If the stress is activated for character X, what might be the reason. I think about those things, but I don't decide on them. I just think about them. This is like a warm-up exercise for the actual improvisational muscle flexing on the day, because I am improvising so much of everything that happens, but it's improvisation that comes from a grounding in our universe, a grounding in the events of our universe. This is why I do the recaps. This is why we do a recap before every session. It's why we do a recap at the end of a session. And why we talk about it during the week. What do you want to do? Why do you want to do it? How do you think it will go? What are you worried about? We talk about these things not so that I can give myself an advantage in having the NPCs behave a certain way, but so that I really understand the characters. And by understanding the characters, I understand how they ended up with the obligations that they have and what their motivation really means, how they are likely to interact with people, and how likely they were to have interacted with the people that are important in their backstories. And that helps me shape the actions and reactions of those people when they are involved. The next big thing is location. Location is important in Star Wars. These vistas, I love the opportunity to be able to give a brief description of a place and see the effect around the table as people recognize, this space fantasy environment, whether it be on a space station or on some kind of hospitable or inhospitable world. I also like to keep in mind that the planetary locations in Star Wars are twofold. There are the locations which are backdrop, like Endor, or to a certain extent like Tatooine. And there are locations which are physical challenges for the characters. And I'm thinking primarily of Hoth, but you could also cite Dagobah here. Or even to a certain extent in the prequels, if you count them as existing or meaning anything, you could count Coruscant as its heavily urbanized environment poses a major threat to everybody that's there, hiding bounty hunters or making pursuit difficult or having witnesses, that sort of thing. So I think about location in those terms. Is this simply setting? Is this something for the awe, the wow factor? Or is this something that's going to play a part in things? And that depends on what it is that the characters are doing. It comes back again to character choice. If the characters have been hired to do something in that location, then maybe I want that location to be a physical challenge. Maybe the characters, I have explorers and I have tacticians. Being able to bring their talents to bear is something that's important to them in order to portray their characters. I have to have respect for their characters by putting things in the environment. By buying those traits, those talents, and those skills, they have shown me what it is that they're interested in doing in my environment. And so, as a dutiful game master, I should make sure that there are experiences that reflect that. So, location. And then, once those things are out of the way, the ties of the past, the ties of the present in the forms of the location, then it's what new thing is going to come along. And our characters are growing, they're learning new things, they're trying new situations, they're taking new jobs, they're trying to build connections with different groups of people. This causes them to cross different lines. This causes them to alienate people that they might not recognize that they've alienated. And as their obligations heat up, as their trail of destruction spreads, as they become legends themselves, who's out to make a name for themselves by bringing them in? So our current situation has, in the recent past, had the characters breaking two justifiably innocent victims out of a bounty hunter guild hall. And they successfully did so, but of course now they are marked. There is no way that the Bounty Hunters Guild is going to, sit still for this. So as I prepare for future sessions, I'm always thinking, where is it likely and appropriate, and in the context of the Star Wars genre, where is it interesting for bounty hunters to track them down? Likely, how plausible is it, and how interesting is it? This is closer to narrative involvement than I like to get, but at the same time, with a loose and mainly improvised setting such as we have, it's the only way to make sure that there's any kind of coherence. The actions that the players put into the setting need to be reflected in how the setting responds and in turn acts, but also reacts. And that's my last point, that it cannot always be about reaction. The players should be proactive and reactive, but the universe also needs to be proactive and reactive. Things need to happen to the characters because of plans. Now, these plans might involve them intentionally or unintentionally, but sometimes things need to happen. Other times, things need to happen because of what the characters are doing. And sometimes these things overlap. And so a part of this stage of my preparation is keeping track of the timeline. I mentioned earlier doing recaps, but just in terms of, what year is it? How long has it been since we started the campaign? What things are happening in the world? So in our universe, only recently has the Battle of Hoth happened. And this is having a profound effect on the Rebel Alliance. And our characters are not really a part of the Rebel Alliance in terms of openly supporting it, but some of them have ties. Some of them have taken duty, and they definitely feel that inner call to join the Alliance, but haven't taken the step yet. They are being affected by the news reports I'm giving them about the glorious victory for the Empire in the remote region of Hoth, and on and on. The universe is reflected in rumor. The universe is reflected in conversation through the notes of their contacts, through things that I imply, either in conversation with NPCs or just in conversation on a metagame level when we're talking about the game, at work or socially. So that is my prep. I don't write things down, really. I think about where they are, where they're going. Am I prepared for where they are and where they're going in terms of being able to describe it? Have I practiced thinking about such a situation or such a place so that I can improvise based on what's actually happening, not what I want to happen or think should happen? Do I have characters in mind that they will meet, innocuous characters that they just might meet on a street or in a spaceport bar or something like that? Do I have their adversaries understood? Do I know what their adversaries can do? This doesn't mean that I have to plan out the adversary point for point. It means that I plan them out like the adversaries in the back of the core books. I know what their most important traits are, the ones that will come up in the type of encounter that they're likely to appear in. And when I do use a trait, then I write it down. Because I'm not going to be able to remember the numbers. I'll be able to remember the personality of the characters, but I won't be able to remember the numbers that become real in play. So if we have a villain from someone's past, then this character has been statted out since I've personally learned about the villain from someone's past. And this would be the extent of any real, hardcore written down preparation that I'd have to do. And I do this purely for the sake of fairness. And as the characters advance, so do these villains. New adversaries, well, they are taken from the templates, and they are adapted according to what makes sense in that scene, what makes sense for that NPC, and what makes sense for our characters to interact with. And then they become, static, let's say, looking forward to benefiting from experience along with our players. And that's it. That's 15 minutes on how I prep, which is usually much longer than I would ever prep for a session. I hope it's in some way helpful, and I hope it sparks some discussion. Let's talk about this.